Have you ever had the feeling that you almost made it, but something stopped you at the last moment, as if reality was about to change? And it simply doesn't. This is not bad luck, and it's not a lack of effort. There is an invisible point inside your mind that decides whether your reality changes or stays the same. And most people touch this point every day without realizing it. Now observe this. In just a few minutes, your state changes completely. You go from clarity to doubt, from confidence to tension, and without realizing it, you leave this portal. And here is the detail that almost no one understands. It's not about entering, it's about remaining. And everything begins with something that seems simple, but defines absolutely everything. Frequency of feeling as an access code. The portal does not respond to what you want, it responds to what you consistently feel. This is the most common mistake. The person thinks positively, but feels pressure. Thinks about growth, but feels fear. This cancels the process. Now look at something curious. Two people can do the same thing and have different results. What changes? The internal state. One enters with tension, the other enters with presence. The action is the same, but the result changes. Now test this. Before any important action, ask, how am I going to feel while doing this? And adjust before starting. It seems simple, but it completely changes the quality of your energy. And when you start to feel different, even without external proof, something begins to open. But this still doesn't sustain, because many people access this state and lose it shortly after. Frequency of clear intention, creating direction. Have you ever noticed how sometimes you enter a good state, calmer, more confident, and a few minutes later it simply disappears? It's not because you lost it, it's because there was no direction. The portal opens with feeling, but is maintained with clarity. If you don't define what you want to sustain, your mind automatically returns to the old pattern. And this happens all the time in daily life. Now observe something very common. You wake up feeling good, lighter, with the sense that the day will flow, but you don't define anything. You don't decide how you want to live that day. Result, the first situation that goes off track already pulls you back into worry. It wasn't a lack of ability, it was a lack of direction. Now change a simple but powerful detail. You wake up and, even without knowing everything that will happen, you decide internally, today I will sustain lightness in my decisions, or today I will act with more clarity. This seems small, but it completely changes how you react throughout the day, because now there is a filter. Your mind stops wandering and starts following a line. Another very real example. You want to improve your financial life. If you think in a vague way and like, I need to make more money, your mind gets lost. But when you define something like, I want to feel more secure with my financial decisions, this changes your behavior. You start observing better before spending. You start thinking more calmly. You start acting differently without realizing it. That is direction. And here's a simple practice that makes a big difference. Whenever you notice that you've entered a good state, don't leave it loose. Define immediately what you want to sustain. It can be something like, I will maintain this calm in the next conversation, or I will carry this clarity through the rest of my day. This holds the state. Another important point that almost no one applies. Clarity is not just knowing what you want, it is also stopping accepting what no longer matches. When you decide internally, I will no longer react this way, or this no longer makes sense to me, you close doors to the old pattern and strengthen the new one. And if this has already made sense to you so far, comment something simple like, direction is everything. Because when you write, you reinforce this in your own mind. And if you realize that this type of content is helping you see things that previously went unnoticed, subscribe to the channel, not out of habit, but because this will keep you in contact with this type of awareness. Because here comes the most important point. Even with feeling and direction, most still fail. And it's not due to lack of effort. It's something much more silent that almost no one notices, but that completely changes the result. Frequency of sustained thought, keeping the portal active. Here is where almost everyone fails without realizing it. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. Thinking right once changes nothing, but repeating the same internal pattern begins to reorganize your reality. Now observe this in your day. You decide to focus on something you want to build, but minutes later you are already thinking about the problem again. This back and forth breaks any progress. Now change a simple but powerful detail. You choose a directed thought and return to it several times throughout the day, without excessive effort, but without abandoning it. It's like keeping a line active. Over time, this stops being an attempt and becomes a pattern. And when it becomes a pattern, your mind stops oscillating so much. And here is something important. Reality does not respond to what you try, it responds to what you sustain. And when this pattern begins to solidify, something invisible starts to appear. Not outside, but inside. Sign of internal alignment, removing resistances. This is the point where many people have a turning point, because they realize that the problem was never lack of effort. It was internal conflict. You want one thing, but feel another. You say you're ready, but react with doubt. And this blocks everything without you noticing. Now think about this practically. You decide to position yourself more, but at the first opportunity you pull back, or you start something new, but mentally already expect it to go wrong. That is resistance, and there's no point trying to think positive over it. The real adjustment is simpler and more direct. Stop sustaining contradiction. A clear example is replacing "this is not going to work" with something coherent, like "I am building this now." It doesn't force well, but it aligns. Another example is noticing your automatic reactions and adjusting little by little without trying to change everything at once. When this alignment begins, something feels lighter. The mind stops dividing, decisions become simpler, and movement starts to flow. And it is exactly at this moment that something changes in your behavior, because you start acting differently without needing to force yourself. Sign of inspired action consolidating the opening. At some point, you start acting differently, but without excessive effort. It's not that heavy action full of pressure. It's simple, direct. You look and think, it makes sense to do this now, and you do it. Before you overthought, delayed, created resistance. Now you don't. A clear example. Something you had been avoiding solving starts to seem obvious, and you resolve it without drama. Another example, you say something you would have avoided before, not because you forced courage, but because now it feels natural. This is aligned action, and here is the point that changes everything. This action does not come from the need to get a result. It comes from the state you have already accessed. And when you act like this, you prove to yourself that you have changed. Each small coherent action eliminates internal doubt, strengthens the state, and accelerates the process. Because now it's not just mental, it begins to reflect outside. But there is still a block that makes many people freeze even after they start acting. Frequency of permission to receive opening the flow. Many people know how to want, but don't know how to receive. And this is one of the most ignored blocks. The person feels, focuses, aligns, acts, but when something starts to happen, they freeze. They begin to question, to doubt, to try to control everything. And this closes the portal. Now observe this in everyday life. An opportunity appears and you overthink until you lose the timing. Something starts to go right and you already expect it to go wrong. That is resistance. And it doesn't look like resistance. It looks like caution, but it blocks everything. The adjustment here is simple, but requires awareness. When something aligns, don't try to control, don't try to anticipate, don't try to guarantee, just allow. Another example, when something positive happens, don't reduce it, don't minimize it, don't question it, just accept and continue. Because receiving requires practical trust, not anxious expectation. And when you start allowing, the flow changes. Things begin to arrive more naturally. And it is exactly here that the most important point of all comes in, the one that defines whether all of this becomes reality or just a passing moment. frequency of sustaining the state, keeping the portal open. Here is the point that separates those who access from those who truly change their reality. Because up to now you have felt, aligned, focused, decided, acted, and started to receive. But none of this remains if it doesn't become a pattern. And this is the most common mistake. The person accesses an elevated state for a moment and then returns to the old one without realizing it. Now observe this in your day. You have a moment of clarity, but hours later you are already in the same old pattern, not because it didn't work, but because it wasn't sustained. Reality does not respond to your best moment, it responds to your dominant pattern. Now change a simple but decisive detail. You access a new state and stop treating it as something temporary. You internally assume that this is now your normal. Another important point: sustaining does not mean never oscillating, it means returning quickly. You leave the state, but you notice and return without getting lost. This creates continuity, and continuity creates stability, and stability transforms everything into concrete reality. Because in the end, the quantum leap does not happen when you access this portal once. It happens when you remain in it long enough for it to become the way you live.